What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Scott Procter alongside my guy Matt Morris, per usual. We're back with another episode of Simple Question, but this time we'll have more than one because you got a special guest joining us today. He covers Kansas football and hoops for the Topeka Capital-Journal down there in Kansas. Jordan Guskey, thanks for joining us, my man. How we doing?
Living the dream, man. Happy to be here.
Sure thing, man. Let's hop right into it, man. Some news recently out of the Big 12. Big 12 Player of the Year is Kansas's big man, Agbaji. How important is he to what the Jayhawks do? And should he be the National Player of the Year? Obviously, he's in those conversations. So I got a little two-piece out the gate for you.
Yeah, I guess to take the second part of that first, maybe I'm a little leaning one way because I saw the Kentucky-Kansas game in Allen Fieldhouse, and Kentucky they had a good time and Kansas didn't in that one. And Oscar certainly had a big day there for Kentucky. So maybe that game's in my head too much. But I feel like Oscar has a bit of an edge just from what I've seen over the course of the season. And then, like I said, you had Kentucky beating Kansas. I think that might just give Oscar the nod in some respects. But Ochai should definitely be in that conversation. If you're the best player on a team that could get a 1 seed, I think you deserve to be in that conversation. So if Ochai gets it, definitely deserves it. I guess I'm about to cast my vote for one of the All-America Awards things, and right now I'm sort of leaning toward Oscars, so that's just where I'm at with that at the moment. But in terms of how important Ochai is, I mean, it's huge. You could see sort of as Big 12 play went on, when teams started face guarding him more and getting on him more, it forces Kansas to adapt. Now, Kansas obviously has the talent. It's got future NBA players that are more than just Ochai. But it definitely forces Kansas to adapt more because he really is the main piece on that team. And it forces guys like Jalen and really both Jalen's and Christian, those kind of guys hit shots. When DeJuan's hitting shots, Kansas can be a real problem because he usually isn't that much of a big threat offensively shooting. But yeah, to sum it up, Ochai's huge. And when he's going, it's really hard to stop Kansas.
Yeah, and you talked about it a little bit, talking about how they might be a 1 seed into the NCAA tournament. Now they're the 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament, but they shared that with Baylor. So do you think Kansas should be the favorite to win the Big 12 tournament?
Oh no, I think at this point, I think Kansas should be. They got hit with a tough schedule down the stretch of NCAA tournament teams, 2 of them on the road. It really isn't that far off that Kansas really took Baylor to the woodshed in Allen Fieldhouse, much like Kentucky did to Kansas. But so I think, and then Kansas really sort of let that game at Baylor get away. I still think that Kansas should be the favorite. They just had a tough sort of end of the season stretch. Not that if there are doubters that they can use that to sort of to knock them down a bit. But with how well Jalen Wilson and David McCormick are both playing, with how well Ochai can play, especially considering they beat Texas just 2 days ago, and Ochai didn't hit a shot until overtime in that game when they did it. I still think with Kansas playing like that, they should be the favorite, at least at this point.
That's the perfect segue to my next question, Jordan. What does it say about this Kansas team that, like you just mentioned, Ochai can go 1 for 11 from the field, not make his first shot into overtime, and the Jayhawks can still beat a really good Texas team? What does that say about, this team's chances down the stretch and really, its depth?
Yeah, well, I don't think Bill would want him to do it again. I think he'd rather avoid that moving forward, but it's huge. I think we've said all year about this Kansas team, or at least we probably heard it all year, how deep it is. And I've sort of been alluding to it there. But then you look at the Big 12 awards that came out as voted by the coaches or whoever actually does vote for him, all 5 of Kansas starters were honored by the Big 12 in some sort of fashion with a first team, a second team, 2 third teams, and then an honorable mention. Then you add in a freshman who's on the all freshman team. And then DeJuan's also on the all defensive team. There are just so many weapons that Kansas can beat you with that it's a tough team to stop if those guys are performing. Now, if you stop Ochai and Christian and Jalen aren't hitting their threes, it's going to be a problem for Kansas because those guys at the next level, it's probably going to be something they're really asked to do. And if they're not doing it here, that's going to be an issue for Kansas. But yeah, it's just a really deep team. And like I've said a couple times, if DeJuan's hitting shots, really look out because teams really a lot of times dare him to hit threes. And if he is hitting them, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and you talked about it answering my last question, but it sounds like you're not really worried about those back-to-back losses as far as Baylor and TCU. So does that worry you heading into the tournament, or is that something where it's a tough team? It's the Big 12. Day in and day out, it's going to be tough to get wins.
Yeah, with as good as the Big 12 is, it's just going to be tough to get wins. I think the TCU loss was concerning at the time just because TCU just outworked Kansas on the glass. And if Kansas is getting outworked on the glass, that's a problem because of how much second chance points can really be a benefit for that team with someone like McCormick. So I think that was concerning for that day or two. And then they sort of recover with, these two last wins, which are close for sure. But I mean, it's the Big 12. Things are going to be close from time to time. So I think the Baylor loss, not that concerning because it's Baylor. Baylor's going to beat a lot of teams at home. They're a really talented team. They should be expected to do that most times. But the TCU loss was for a little bit, but wasn't anymore after they sort of recovered here these last two games.
You alluded to Kansas being a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. Is that appropriate? Do you think this team is deserving of that number one seed label, or do you think a 2 seed? And obviously, a lot of that will be decided this weekend. Obviously, when the Big 12 tournament kind of unfolds. But do you see this team as kind of a top 4 team in college basketball, or do you kind of see them right outside of that top 4?
I guess I would say I definitely see him as a top 8 team. Sure. I just put something out that basically something weird would have to happen for them to drop down to a 3 seed in my mind at this Big 12 tournament or whatever happens in these conference tournaments. So I definitely see them as a top 8 team, and they probably are on that fringe of 3 to 6 right now. So I would sort of imagine that's sort of where they are at this point. And so, yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of it's going to be determined. It just seems like the way the season has turned out to me that it's going to be either Baylor is going to get a 1 seed or Kansas is going to get a 1 seed. Right. It's sort of just how it sort of seems right now. And sort of, so yeah, they're deserving, but there's more than 4 teams deserving of a 1 seed right now. And so it'll just have to work itself out.
Man, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And we've talked a lot, Scott and I, about how there's not really one favorite this year. There's a lot of really good teams that have a chance. How do you like Kansas's chances to make a deep run and get to the Final Four? And what are some of the things that you kind of turn to as reasons why they're going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a really good shot. I mean, the thing about Kansas is, and maybe this is an example of just, what you're talking about, sort of there's not just one favorite, but Kansas can be so good that it can beat Baylor by 24. It's also it's not invincible, so we can lose to Kentucky by a ton at home. It can go lose to Dayton and Florida in that tournament, which, early in the season, but still it can get beat in some of these games, but it can also, as I mentioned, have some really huge wins. It can win a lot of these close games. I think it's 6-2 this season in games decided by 4 points or less, with most of that coming in Big 12 play, 2 in overtime against Texas Tech and Texas. So it's capable of making a deep run because it has the talent to. It's also capable of having some sort of early exit because it's not perfect. It's not an elite athletic team. It has to win with physicality. So if it goes up against an elite athletic team, that could be a problem if it's not physical enough. If it plays a team with a stretch 5 big, that could be an issue for them defensively because it has been at times this season. So there are issues that this Kansas team could run into, but it has enough talent where it could make a run, and that's because it has Ochai, who could win Player of the Year. It has Christian Brown, who could be another first-round draft pick. Jalen Wilson, I think if he sticks around for another year, could be a first-round draft pick next year. And, has, go down the list of players. It has Remy Martin is still sort of working his way back, and he was the preseason Player of the Year for the conference and hasn't really done a whole lot because of his injury. So there's just so much talent, but it's also not a perfect team that's, capable of losing a game it maybe shouldn't.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Jordan. I'll probably close here because I know you don't just only watch and consume Kansas hoops. What other team, maybe another team or two, do you really like or see as a possibility to play in a national championship? Who are maybe a team or two that you wouldn't be surprised at all would be kind of the last couple teams standing?
I say this team every year, and eventually I'm going to be right. Eventually Matt Painter is going to do it for me, but I always feel like Purdue is a team that I watch out for. Maybe it's because I went to IU, so I've seen Purdue play so much, been watching their program play so much. Maybe I'm a little bit biased in that, but I just always love the way those teams play, the way they're constructed with bigs inside, 3-point shooting, usually a really good point guard Like this year it's Jaden Ivey, in the past it's been Carson Edwards. So yeah, Purdue, I don't know. Like I said, I'm a little bit sort of tied to that team in a way, but I just feel like Purdue and then probably Kentucky as well because of how athletic that team's been.
No, that's interesting. We just got off a call with Nick Osen, who covers Iowa State for 24/7 Sports. He also mentioned Kentucky as one of those teams. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned Purdue because I feel like a lot of people are kind of writing them off probably after that loss to Wisconsin, which was obviously a crazy game. But I think that's kind of a loss that'll kind of propel them into the tournament. And obviously, Edey and, Jaden Ivey's a future pro baller in the pro. So I like that pick. I think Purdue can definitely make some noise, especially coming off that ridiculous loss to Wisconsin at the buzzer.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden can create his own shot. He basically, like, when they lost at IU, if you extend that game like 2 more minutes, Purdue wins because Jaden Ivey is just playing that well. He just ran out of time.
Literally.
With a player like that, it's going to be tough. If he's on, it's tough to beat him.
100%. Sweet. Hey, that's going to do it for us, though, Jordan. Thanks so much for joining us, man, for your insight, as always. It's appreciated. Go follow Jordan and his work on Twitter. But that's going to do it for us. For Scott Procter, Matt Morris, our guy, Jordan Guskey. We'll catch you next time on Simple Question.